Welcome to Season 3 of the Erie Music History Podcast. I'm Chip Shell, your host. Hey, I'm kicking off this season with a guy that I've been trying to get since really I started Season 2, Marty Coe of Friction. If you know anything about Erie bands, Friction was obviously a super popular band in the 1980s especially, but really they were in existence since the late 1970s, and they continued into the 90s. As an original founding member, Marty was really able to share some great stories throughout the whole history of the band. But you know what? I'll just shut up and let him do all that. So here's episode 1 of Season 3 featuring Marty Coe. And remember to like and subscribe this podcast wherever you listen. Thanks. All right. Marty Coe, thank you for being on the Erie Music History Podcast. Welcome.
Dan, or Chip.
Whoever I am.
Dan, thanks for having me.
This is awesome, man. Thanks for being here. We talked a little bit ahead of time. Like, we're talking about a 30-year career, right, in Friction. So we don't have enough time to cover every little nuance of that.
Yeah.
We're gonna get
well,
into
actually, 78, I was in Friction for 16 years, and then I think this is my 45th year. 45th year of entertaining in the greater Erie.
Friction went from 78 to 2000.
My involvement was 78 to about 90, I think 93 the first time, and then they went further on.
Yeah. Okay.
Then we had a reunion show, so I kind of came back to the reunion show, and I guess
right?
My tag for my YouTube channels, I look at the screen, I go, I'm Marty Coe, and I used to be in Friction, but actually I'm probably still in Friction as much as the other guys.
There you go. That's right.
Yeah.
And those, I'm glad you mentioned your video channels, because in the episode notes for this episode, I'm going to include the links to all your stuff, because you've got a few different video channels. A lot of what you're going to hear me say today, I learned from you already by watching your video channels. So this should all sound really familiar to you.
Hi, I'm Marty Coe.
That's right.
I used to be in Friction.
So there has been, I think, 13 people that have been in Friction. And I want to go through the list and see if you'd correct me. So a guy named Marty Coe, he's in Friction. Bob Michael. Chris Winzikowski.
The three of us went to school together, started the band. So they were...
Rich Dales.
Yes.
George Callaghan. Marlon Scott. Dave Winzikowski?
Dave Winzikowski. Different one, same Polish last, or same sounding Polish last name. It was easy to...
Are they... it's a different spelling.
They're
not brothers or anything.
They're not related at all.
Oh my gosh, I thought that there was a...
They're just
name.
of Polish heritage.
With a lot of consonants in their name. Got it. All right. Your only girl, Donna Lee Watts.
Donna Lee Watts, we graduated with Donna Lee, so she's, the core of the group was from Union City, Pennsylvania. So I was
going to say, like,
something in the water.
Yeah, for sure. Exactly.
George Callaghan went to school with us. He was a year younger than us, but we all started the band together.
So we got Donna Lee Watts. After her, I have Paul Roby, the infamous Keith Vasheko, which I did not know was in Friction for a while. Dave Bennett, Matt Gavula, and Ron Lesh.
Ron Lesh was the some people are going to listen to this and go, well, what about me? But you
were the first one I mentioned. Oh, you mean other people?
Yeah, because I get that on Facebook, and I've tried to fill in all the spots. I can't remember, and I just know that the core members, and the people that started the band. We had a couple of keyboard players that were in and around the Paul Roby time.
Okay.
But I can't even remember good guys, but I can't remember. I've tried to remember the names. And
you've had a lot of sound and light guys over the years. I was surprised to see John Rainey had chimed in on that he had helped as a sound, for a little while. And Buster, obviously. Gordy.
Yeah, Gordon
McCord. Nino Gennaro was the light man for you. Of course, Mike Shrimp Pius.
Yep. He was lights.
Right. Mike Wolchek.
Mike Wolchek ran sound after we had. I should note that our first sound sound tech was Steve Vandervoort.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you have him.
No, I was going to say I probably am missing some of them.
And he was there for probably 6-8 years, and then Mike Walchek took over the main bulk of.
Was Buster there the longest?
Buster was in between Steve and Mike Walchek. Sorry.
All right.
Yeah.
Was that before he was like the house guy at Sherlock's?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. All right. Yeah. So a lot of people have been involved with this band over the years.
Yeah.
Obviously. I mean, I'm going to say it's one of the longest lasting bands, one of the most popular bands, and one of the most beloved bands that this town has ever had.
Wow. Thanks, Dan.
Seriously. I mean,
when you get into the, like, where I'm at now, where I've gotten to that icon stage.
That's right.
Hi, I'm Marty Coe. I used to be in Friction.
So when you started Friction in 1977, you and Chris, right? Or
Yes.
Mark. You and Chris.
I'll tell you real quick.
And, tell me the story of them.
Bob always played guitar.
Right.
Sat out on the playground with his acoustic guitar, and all the chicks came up to him all the time
City.
in Union City.
Right.
And we were in the class of 1980.
Okay.
And then Chris was a drummer for the marching band, but then put together a kit. Him and Bob started getting together.
Right.
I was best friends with Bob, and they needed a bass player. And actually, I started playing bass on a keyboard because how naive, how naive we were.
What was your first bass? Do you remember?
No, it was. I think you could have bought it at Sears.
I bought one at Sears. That was one. First
Kmart.
Bass. Yeah,
it wasn't a Court though.
Yeah, mine was a Court.
Mine it wasn't.
Yeah. Headless Court. Yeah,
it was. Yeah.
How about today? How many basses do you still have?
I only have. I have a Fender. I actually there's a Fender Jazz 67 Jazz that I took apart out at one of our. Yeah, and it was black, and I turned it in, and I got it painted and was refinishing it, and then we moved out of a studio, and it's out there someplace.
You said it's out there. I saw that in one of your videos.
Somebody got that.
Yeah.
So I really I'm more of a singer now.
Oh, okay.
I do play bass. I've been asked to come and fill in, and and if I know half the songs on their set list, then the other half I can fake.
And we should be saying, I mean, if you don't know, Marty plays in the Earthquakers, and you've played in the Earthquakers for...
Marty Coe doesn't play in the Earthquakers.
Right.
Isaiah Work.
That's right, Isaiah Work does.
His brother Isaiah Work.
How long have the Earthquakers
Oh,
been
my
around?
God. I joined the band in 96.
Okay, so I mean...
It's 96 to now, and we're booking up our summer right now as we speak, so, yeah.
You have been in two bands. Since 1978.
Luckiest man on the face of the earth.
Two super successful bands. That's great. And success came to you guys, I feel, really quick. So you play 1978, the New Year's Eve gig, your first gig with the three of you, you and Bob and Chris, right?
United Methodist Church Youth Group.
Right. And then, shortly thereafter, you add some of those folks that we talked about. Rich Dales, he's from Cortland, Ohio. You used to camp with him, or Bob used to camp with him. You met him. And then George comes in on keys. So Friction becomes a five-piece.
Well, actually, George was out of high school with us.
Oh.
And he basically, his dad was a doctor.
Okay.
So as I remember correctly, he needed to go to college.
Okay.
And he played, and that's why Donna Lee came in. Donna Lee wasn't original with us.
Right.
But George kind of came in. He went out and bought a keyboard, and he kind of just started playing with it.
Okay.
So that's how a lot of bands. I'm sure there's a million bands out there that they morph into something when somebody has rich parents, and they can
do that.
Yeah, they can do that.
Were those early gigs, aside from the church gig, like I always envision you? I'm a little bit younger than you. Like I probably saw you at, you probably played at some high school gigs.
Yeah.
That I did at first. Was that the bulk of your gigs?
It just mushroomed out of. We played Union City High School during the day at the school. What do they call
a
it?
pep rally or something?
Or a talent show. No, it was just, we just did a concert during the day, and then we did a dance at night, and we were still in school. I think we were juniors or seniors. And, of course, those dances, you'd have Seneca, Fort LaBeouf, Corey. All of those schools would come to the Union City dance. They had a band. We played. And then all of those people that were at those dances would get a hold of it. And it was marketing.
Sure.
It wasn't on purpose.
Right.
But that's how most marketing things that kind of take off that way.
Right.
And I'd have to say that started in 78, really in the summer of 78. By homecoming, we were playing 3 or 4 or 5 different high schools in Erie County, Fairview, Seneca.
And you're still in high school at this point?
Yeah.
Okay, because you graduated in 80, so...
We didn't really start playing any bars until maybe the Abbey up in, or the New York, you could still drink at the age of 18
That's right.
back then, so there was a whole market. But we really didn't play any bars until probably 80, 81.
So schools.
High schools, and that was really later on our claim to fame was... I looked this up one time about 10 years ago, and I believe that we played every high school in Erie County.
Yeah.
A large majority of them in Crawford and Warren County, up in the New York, Chautauqua County, New York. We had this hot spot over near Indianapolis, Crawford. I think it's Crawfordville, Indianapolis. It's somebody saw us over here for a prom.
Yeah.
Brought us over there. We did every activity that they had. And we're talking this is 6 hours away.
Wow.
Across Ohio into
India.
India.
Young kids.
And we were...
Yeah.
And we went over there, and then we, like the Warren, Youngstown, and this was all high schools.
In those early days, did you have a crew, a sound crew, or was it just whatever you had cobbled together as far as like a PA?
Just cobbled together a PA for the first year until we realized that, we need something a little bit bigger. And then the PA over the next 5 years just got, by 82, 83, we were hauling around a full size, I won't go into all the specifics.
Were you investing as a band in all that stuff, or was it one person?
No, we went to our parents and said, "Could you co-sign?"
Did you really?
My last name is Coe, so my dad, it was easy for him to. And so it really, for the first 2 or 3 years, we had marketing in the high schools and proms, homecomings, Valentine's dances, all of those kind of things, with a mix of, but very few bars, and that was kind of neat.
You mentioned the Abbey. Was that your first bar that you played at?
Yeah, one of them. There was still a few smaller bars in Erie here that we did at the same time. It all kind of happened that during the summertime we morphed into a bar band because there wasn't the high schools.
Oh, yeah, right.
But starting September all the way through Christmas, you have all those events, and then you have the springtime events, and then you have the proms and the prom the dawns and the after parties and all of those, and we did them all.
That's great. Yeah, that's what a lot of people probably remember you. I'm sure you've had tons of people say over the years, you played our prom, you played this, you played that.
And probably to tie it in at that 80, 81 mark, because we graduated in 80, that, Bob was always saying, he was one of those guitar players that would sit down in his room and start writing and use the like a reel-to-reel 2-track, and then bump them.
Yeah, right.
And write some songs and stuff like that. And at that time, we knew, for some reason, that we needed to go record
originals.
So we went to Buffalo to Select Sound in Kenmore, New York, and
at that point, the interesting thing is you now have Dave Winzikowski, the drummer. Am I saying his name right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then I know that Donna Lee
Chris
and George kind of crossed over.
Chris Winzikowski and Dave, because it's W-Y-Z-Y.
Right, yeah.
And Dave came into the band at the time of Chris got a full ride to Gannon.
Oh, that's why he left. Okay,
and same thing that's why George Callaghan left.
Right. So two of them go off to college. You get Donna, who is, as you said, like a concert trained pianist. Like, she's not George, who picked it up. She had been traveling around.
Yeah.
She was good. She's in the band. You go to Kenmore, like you said, and you guys record Rockin' Tonight and But I Tried.
Yes.
Great 45. This is 1981. Like I said, this is 3
Yeah, that was recorded in the fall of 80. Okay. And then it was released in early '81, and then
What was that like? Like you, how did you pick Kenmore? How did you pick what was it called?
Select Sound was. I think we just found it.
Pages.
We may have done something up at a school, or we may have done something that somehow we found, and it was real nice studio.
Yeah.
Nothing, and they had a good price on it. We did those two songs, and
you also had a bit of a crossover there too, right? Because Donna was kind of leaving, right, at the time, and
Donna Lee, yeah.
And
She
Paul was coming in.
Paul, that was a couple of years later, maybe a year and a half later that because boy, all that crunched together, because you'd think, in my mind, in my memory, that's about a 30-year time span, those 3 or 4 years, because it's like, wow.
I'm asking you to do a lot here.
Well, I'm saying, as far as what's crunched in there, you would think that with all the things that happened, it seems like it was 30 years, not 30 years ago, but like,
it took a long time.
But when I go back and start putting timestamps on things, it's amazing that guys that I thought that were involved with Friction, I thought were there for a couple of years, were only there for 6 months.
Right.
So,
I mean, Rockin' Tonight, 1980, 81, like you said, it's released in 81. First original, you come out and somehow somebody knows Bill Shannon at K104 and you get it played. How'd that happen? Do you remember? Taking it to him?
We just walked in.
You did.
Yeah. And you got to also say there was a couple. I think a band called the Peens.
Yep.
And
the Pulse.
And the Pulse had just had You Want to Know Why.
Yep.
And so we were like, let's get this mixed and let's take it down there, because he was receptive to it.
Yeah.
That's all.
Fantastic song that you've played for years, one of your biggest hits. And when I introduced Friction, I said one of the most popular and successful bands. Let's talk about the success. I mean, back then you had that song. It was #1 for 9 weeks on WCCK, which became K104, and then #10 for the entire year.
Yeah,
like younger people listening to this, that would blow their minds that #1, a local band is being played on local radio, but #2, that you were that popular. I mean, it must have been, you told some of the stories on your video of like pulling over in your car.
Oh yeah, I had that. You see it on movies all the time when you got the bands. That one movie they made about where they did that same thing. They all ran into the store, and I did that on the way on Route 19 between Erie and Waterford. I was up by the old one of the radio stations down there where B. Canfield used to live.
Oh yeah.
Right there in that area, and I heard it for the first time.
Had to be.
And it's kind of funny because they were playing that. It got to on a rotation that they were playing that like every 15 minutes.
Wow.
And it's really cool that when you become that successful and famous, when you got people that are sick of your song because they hear it so much. Because that's the way radio was back then. They just, if something was good and people requested it, they just pounded it into your head. So what a better song to pound into somebody's head, you know?
How many did you make? There were 45s, right?
Actually, I brought.
You brought one.
Well, I brought all the. No, that's for the Baby Talk CD. But I do have that somewhere, and I think it was because I have it all written down of our consignment schedules and all of that kind of stuff like that. I don't remember. I'd have to say 1.7 million copies.
Maybe not that many, right?
Of somebody's song, but
you mentioned the Pulse, and at one point you guys recorded You Want to Know Why.
Yeah, that was Dennis Cohen had kind of gotten involved with us. He was involved with the Pulse, owned Molly B's, and he managed the Pulse, and then Marty Lee moved on to Donnie Iris during that, and the Pulse kind of broke up. And and we were thick into that because that got us involved with a couple of shows with the Pulse before they broke up.
Why record their song? You just didn't.
I think, in all fairness to Dennis, he thought it was a good idea. We didn't.
Okay, yeah.
It was kind of like, so I love the song. In fact, our rendition of it is is weak. I really feel, only because it's kind of glossed over,
right,
as a lot of remakes are.
Sure.
And it was, I mean, we remade that probably a year after it had been out, and the Pulse, their version is so raw.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah, and not that, I mean, ours, if you didn't hear theirs and you listen to ours, it's kind of like the Muzak elevator version with lyrics. That's
is it on a 45?
I don't think it was. No. It's just it's just in our memories.
That's right, in the ether. Yeah, gotcha.
Felt like I was on the Titanic for a second when I said that. It's just in our memories.
Nice. And I'm missing at midnight. I go punk.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? Let me set something straight on that. At midnight I go punk.
Yes.
Midnight I go punk.
Right.
That song, we used to hang with a lot of punkers back then in the scene. I mean, only because we were usually playing, but we'd go out to bars and stuff like that, and we'd see them.
Guys and the Dogs.
Yeah, I mean, many different guys, many different bands, and usually just musicians themselves. We'd be at some bar drinking.
Yeah.
And as long as we didn't mention we were in Friction, they would get along with us, and and we'd get the buzz going. Just fine. And we always admired what they, the difference between us and the punk bands is they didn't care if their guitars weren't out of tune.
Gotcha.
Or in tune.
Right.
We struggled with the same thing and got the same result as they did, but they just didn't worry about it.
Right.
But Midnight I Go Punk was always written as a tribute. Now, if you look on some of the current sites that whenever that song is mentioned, you'll get a couple of people that'll comment, and they get harsh a little bit that we were slamming, the punk scene.
But it was
we didn't really care.
Yeah, right.
I mean, we were doing the same thing they were doing, and to me, it was never a competition. It was more or less, we were always performing all the time.
That was one thing I always ask musicians is, when you're that popular or you're playing out a lot, in your off time, who did you go see? Who did you like to go see back then?
We didn't really get a chance to.
I bet.
Because we were playing all the time.
Right.
A lot of these guys that were in bands, and they talk to me about, this band, that band, through the 80s, we were always performing. I mean, every Friday and Saturday with very few. There was years where we didn't have any weekends off.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah.
I'm out. If I got a chance to see, I probably actually saw more lounge bands back in the early 80s, which I had a blast with, at the Holiday Inn South and all the different circuit that used to go through Erie that, you could go there on a Monday night or a Tuesday night.
Right.
And you could hang out and drink beer and,
That's a good point. Like, there was a lot more live music back then on different days of the week, too.
Yeah, I mean, the lounge circuit, I tell you what, some of those bands and some of those musicians were the best I ever heard.
Sure.
Some of them knew that they were the best. But
what was the scene like back then? Was it that camaraderie that you just described, like, hey, we're all in this together?
No, it depended on your, a little story to the first time I met Keith Vasheko, we were at Markham's Music.
Sure.
And Keith came off as a know-it-all, arrogant guy. I mean, because he did, to us that didn't know him.
Yeah.
And, I got to know Keith, very well over the years, and, miss him. But we went into Markham's. They used to have a music store next door to Markham's for sheet music.
Yeah.
This is how naive we were in, like, 78. Bob and I went in, Bob Michael, we went in there, and we were looking for sheet music for the songs that we wanted to learn.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is sheet music for rock and roll songs don't really come out until about 10 years later.
Right.
And we didn't know what to do, and then we went in and started talking to Keith, and I, Keith was, that first time we met him, anyhow,
he was a knowledgeable guy. And you guys didn't know anything.
Yeah, we didn't know. Yeah. We didn't know jack. So I wouldn't talk to me anyhow at that time. But we broke him down after about 15 minutes because then we got it. We worked it so he felt sorry for us. And then he looked at us, and I can remember this. He goes, "You guys are idiots. You just buy a 45 and you listen to it."
Right.
And we're like, "No shit." Wow. And it was easy from then.
Yeah. And that's how you had to learn all those songs back then, I imagine.
Well, in that point, I'd have to say I was like the generation before us. A lot of those musicians, and I've gotten to know a lot of them: the Kevin Bensicks, the Keith Fashekos, the Steve McConnells. Yep. Steve McConnell, was in the Snowmen. Who is it? Is it Bill Miller? Was he the bass player?
He was.
Excellent singer. I think he was in Rhythm Method too, right? If I'm
maybe, I'm not sure.
Something like that.
Keith was in Rhythm Method. Yeah, right.
I'd have to say that. The difference between, and I'm going to get myself in hot water with some of these guys, but I think I don't know. It seems that generation of music was a lot more protective of their craft.
Oh, okay.
Than, like, let's say 10 years later in the 78, 79, and we're coming along to where sometimes they closed a lot of doors.
Yeah.
They didn't share a lot of information,
Gotcha.
The camaraderie. I always had a point where if you were a performer in the mid-'80s and you wanted to know something about something, and if I could help you, I would I would just give it to you.
Sure, right.
You could steal all my ideas because I stole all of my ideas I stole from somebody else.
Right.
And that's no cut on. I mean, Kevin Bensick, I can get on the phone with him and just talk for hours.
And those guys, when you talk about a different generation, so how old are you now? Am I allowed
39.
Nice.
No.
Okay.
No, I just turned 60.
Okay, you just turned 60, and those guys have got to be 5 years older.
Yeah, they're all probably
Not
in
much, right?
Well, I'd have to say they're in their mid-60s to some of them pushing 70.
Okay, all right.
And this is just my opinion that it just seemed like that things were in the 60s were pretty hard as like technology, like the instruments they had to play, the stuff they had to do, the things they had to learn. They were almost some of the guys learning it first.
Right.
And they didn't really want to give away that maybe secret ingredient.
Right.
And I completely understand that.
Yeah.
I had a different take on it because I had to beg, borrow, and steal to learn some of that stuff, and a lot of people weren't forthcoming with that, and I never understood that.
Right. Yeah, you're still young at the time, and so we are at the point where Marlon joins the band.
Yeah.
Key player for many, many, many years. Really, you and he and Bob become the core of the band for many years, correct?
Yeah,
And Marlon was a McCain guy. You went over to his house and said, "Hey, want to join the band?" Because Rich had to go back home or something.
Yeah, Rich was a couple of years, so he still had a couple of years left of school. He was actually only like 16 when he was in for the first. I might get it all mixed up, but I'd have to say Marlon came in this like May or June, came over and tried out at my house. Beginning of that summer of 1980. It was
80 back then. Okay.
Yeah, like I said, that 80 to 82, there was a lot of comings and goings and a lot of stuff. Chris left in the summer of 80 because we graduated, and like I said, he had a full ride to Gannon for 4 years.
Dave takes over.
Dave came into the band. Marlon joined the band. Marlon, honest to God, that story I told through a friend of mine. Knew about him. We called him. I went over. He told me on the phone that he couldn't do it.
And you didn't know him from anyone?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, right.
He was just a friend of mine. A friend of mine's cousin.
Okay.
Went to school with Marlon or knew of him, and he actually called me back because his dad said, give him a shot. I mean, you want to go out and play, And again, we had no idea what we were doing.
About the same age?
Marlon, I think, is 3 years older than me.
Oh, okay.
I believe.
Okay.
Marlon, I think, he's 3 years older. So if I'm 39, he's 41, 42.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Yeah. So, one of the things I was going to ask you is, when I was looking at some of the different pictures that were online. Talk to me about you guys traveling. Because there's a picture of you in Ocean City, is that right? Or
Ocean City.
Yeah. Like, how far did you go back in those early days?
Well, like I said about the high schools that we played over in Indiana, somehow somebody, word of mouth, somebody sees you, they get a hold of you, we end up getting hot in that pocket. We ended up getting hot, of all places, in the Washington, D.C. metro area. Oh. So when you have Washington, D.C., and then you have Maryland, and you have Virginia, you're talking about Georgetown and Washington, D.C. proper.
Right.
Then you have all the way down from, let's say, Breezewood on the Turnpike, all the way down 70 into either up in the Baltimore or Washington back then, and all the way to 79. So there's a corridor that if you get hooked up with the agencies in Washington, D.C., they book you all the way. In fact, they would book us almost all the way back into Ohio and Kentucky. And,
okay.
But for about 3-4 years, we were very strong in the Washington, D.C. area.
Did you have a manager, or did you do all the bookings?
Yeah, Dennis Cohen actually approached us about managing, and he hooked up with another gentleman that out of the D.C. area, and we went down there and did a showcase one day, and the place we played at it was called the Bayou. It was a very famous bar that was down under one of the elevated streets or whatever down there in Georgetown. But man, what a bar!
How does that work when you go to, Washington, D.C.? Is it a weekend gig, or is it a single nighter? Are you playing multiple places? They're putting you up.
Most of the stuff we traveled. Well, back then in the early part of our traveling, we didn't have the package deals where we'd get hotels and
That's
stuff.
What I wondered, yeah.
And so we would travel with 8 people and all sleep in one room.
Really?
Taking, literally to save money.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. So we did all those cliche things that you see in the movies. The truck's breaking down.
Did you have your own truck?
Oh yeah, trucks catching on fire. Speeding tickets.
Yeah.
Every I can tell you stories about like Shrimp and Steve were sleeping in the back of one of the trucks, and we were coming from Kentucky and heading into someplace in the Washington D.C. area. Might have been Baltimore. There was a huge area, huge circuit of bars and that, in Baltimore too. Maryland, which is east of Washington, Baltimore.
Right.
So there was just a circuit, but we were on the Turnpike, or no, actually we were coming across from Kentucky, and I can't remember, but we pulled over about 4 o'clock in the morning, and it about 80 degrees overnight, like 75, 80.
Great.
So in the morning at about 9 o'clock, like I was in the cab with another, I can't remember who else was with us. Well, and Steve, our sound man, and Shrimp were in the back up in the equipment.
Right.
Well, it's aluminum box. And it was like 9 o'clock in the morning, and we woke up, Problem is that damn booze that you have. And then you're still driving a big truck. So we're in the cab. I'm on the floor, and another guy's on the bench seat, and they're in the back. And I woke up all of a sudden, and it's like 105 degrees in the cab. I think it was on the side of the Turnpike, Pennsylvania Turnpike, one of those big pull. Those guys are in back, and I thought they were dead.
Yeah, right.
Oh, that, and so I opened it up, and they were literally, we had it cracked a little bit. Yeah. They were still sleeping, but when we opened it up,
that's some good booze.
I'd have to say probably another half hour, and they would have succumbed. It was pretty crazy.
Back then, what were you getting paid?
Nothing.
It couldn't have been. Yeah.
Everything was just going. That truck we were driving, it was just,
You weren't making much.
Nope.
Especially if you had to do a hotel or a motel or
whatever,
it
was crazy.
It was all.
We were probably back then, like you do a 7-nighter at the Bayou there in Georgetown, Monday through Sunday.
Oh, you would stay that long?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
and then
okay.
and then you'd have like Wednesdays sometimes, depending on the club, the bigger clubs, they'd have a national act night.
Oh,
this happened more when we traveled in the late 80s down south. That was the routine. But they actually did it at the Bayou, where on Wednesday night or Thursday night, it would be dark as far as, which means that we weren't playing. So we'd play Monday, Tuesday, off on Wednesday, and then play Thursday, Friday. And then there'd be a national act that they would,
right.
a mid-level, national act or somebody that was on their way up or somebody
Sure.
that was on their way down.
What would you do on those off days?
Drink.
Got it. Living the life.
We didn't really do a lot of drugs. I don't think, One time I was in a bar that was owned by in Cleveland, and there was a mirror and there was some white substance on it. Now, I'd seen people do that stuff,
Sure.
all the time. So I just took my finger and went like that and put it to my tongue, and it tasted just like Novocaine. It must be that Eric Clapton song.
That's right.
Yeah. But that, we wanted to just do it. I
Right.
mean, it was most of it was by we had no plan.
You didn't
really.
have regular jobs.
No.
Nobody did.
No.
Okay. Even your sound men and all those
No,
guys?
we just
Okay.
we were, I was 33 when I took on my first
job.
First full-time. In fact, I'm still at it. So.
Where were you guys living at the time? Were you all still at home?
I was at home.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were all, that in the early 80s, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
and then
That's some supportive parents.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's great.
it's the American dream.
It is. It is.
Well, something. You know that when you have a number one song on the radio like we did
Yeah.
in 1981,
Right.
You've reached success, the Bon Jovi type success. When you can pull up to any fast food restaurant in Erie, McDonald's, Taco Bell, any of them,
Right.
even the sit-downs.
Red Barn.
Red Barn,
Yeah.
even Sambo's.
Okay. Right.
Before it turned into something else.
Right.
And you get free food because you played their high school.
Wow. All right.
And of course, I'd be like, hey, could I get a double quarter pounder with cheese? This is Marty Coe from Friction. Marty Coe from Friction. Drive around. I try to hand them the money. They go, no, we got it.
Cool.
That's success, Dan.
How far did that song go as far as being played? Did it
Just
go
locally.
outside? It was just local?
It got some airplay in Pittsburgh, Buffalo, and Cleveland,
okay.
but nothing. That was strictly, that was our claim to fame, because it was really nice that in Billboard they would have the reporting magazines that they'd send to the radio stations, and we'd get them, after they when they got done with them, when they were a week later, we could actually go in there and look in the back, and it would show what songs in the Erie area are
Sure.
charting or with a bullet.
Right.
And I can't find any of those, but Rockin' Tonight was on there. Of course, we had a few songs that were, over the 80s that,
Right.
in the 80s that did the same thing, where we could watch it. Back then, you could watch it chart, and
that was the plan, right? I mean, your plan was to become beyond Erie, obviously. I mean, you played everywhere. I mean, or was that the plan?
Oh, sure. Yeah, we wanted we wanted millions of dollars.
Sure. Right. I mean, what was the closest that you got? I know that the one time, what was it? They wanted you to record an album or a soundtrack when Keith was in the band for a movie.
Yeah, we. That's
Talk
how
about
Keith.
that.
That's how Keith kind of got interested. There was a group of investors out of Cleveland.
Okay.
That were investors.
Gotcha.
And they somehow heard of the band, and there was a song called Walk Alone that was on a 45
Right.
that I had written and we'd put out. And they had heard that song, and they liked the song, and they had a movie, and anyhow, it was going to be a biker movie with Kurt Russell, and I actually was trying to find the original script to bring it into
what was
you.
the movie? Did it eventually come out?
It was called In the Wind, and then Bob approached Keith, or vice versa, I can't remember, but it all kind of happened within about a month's time that we went and met with the investors, and they gave us a script, and Keith and Bob and Marlon. I didn't really have anything, because the funny thing is, the Walk Alone was the song I wrote that got the initial interest. But then it got pushed out of the way, which is no big deal.
Okay. Yeah.
It was a song about walking alone.
Hey, you can see you guys perform that song on one of your videos. It's a great song. And so what happens then? They start writing the soundtrack, or you?
Let's
all
just
do?
say the investors, some of them got indicted.
Oh.
So they just ended up getting into trouble, and it kind of pulled the plug on the whole thing.
Out.
And then we had there's probably 10, 12 songs that were written by Keith and Bob and Marlon, and that we recorded, but then they never saw anything on that. So that's another chapter that was pretty interesting.
Are those songs, did Keith record those at TRS? Or?
Yeah, we went into Keith. By that time we started, instead of going to Buffalo, we had a good relationship with Keith, and as long as you paid him, he would record you, which is business.
And what happened with Paul? So Paul was in the band. Did Paul leave and then Keith filled in for keyboards, or?
I can just say that Paul Roby involvement. Boy, I'm trying to think how he came into the band, and unfortunately, even before we played our first show in Friction, Paul spent most of his time. And man, we had some good times at Doc's Tavern on 12th Street before they built 79. But him and I left one night, and he got hit by a car on his motorcycle, and it damaged his leg pretty bad. And he spent most of the time in Friction, maybe the 2 or 3 years that he was in Friction, dealing with that.
Oh, bummer.
And And again, I speak with Paul every once in a while, and we can just look at each other and just crack each other up, and it's just like, and I just wish it wouldn't have happened, because I think with his talent and what he could do, because that was the Loverboy era, where that rock and roll type of style, and I'd have to say Bon Jovi kind of
absolutely
carried that on maybe in 84, 85,
right.
But that Loverboy style of band was what Friction was.
Absolutely. You guys were right in there with all of them. That's why I wondered, about how far did it go.
And Paul had it. Paul was he could sit down and just play naturally, and it was, and so when it comes to business and stuff like that, what happened to him, I mean, personally, with what he was dealing with, at that time, I didn't understand it. The other guys in the band didn't understand our side of it. So when he's dealing with that, and it did cause a lot of friction.
No pun intended.
Yeah, it was.
Well, I have a picture, or there's a picture online from '83, and you guys are backstage somewhere, and Rich Dales is in the picture.
Yeah, he came back in. Marlon actually went to college again. Him and Donna Lee left and went to college for like a year.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm telling you, it's right in that 80 to 83.
Like
there was a lot of rotations, and then somehow I can't remember how Paul. But man, no, that time was what a great time to be alive and be in a band and have all the stuff just fell on our lap.
Yeah.
I don't think we did plan on recording an originals. Or a original, Rockin' Tonight and But I Tried. But besides that, we really always, our mantra with original material was, we're going to give it to Bill Shannon, or we're going to give it to Jim Cook.
Right.
We were envied and hated sometimes, because those people, a lot of other musicians, a lot of other people thought that we had this in with Bill Shannon and Jim Cook. Well, we became friends with them.
Sure.
I mean, more with Jim Cook than Bill Shannon, but there was nothing. The same friendship that these other bands could have started, and we always felt that we took our songs, even later on as we had the songs play on the radio over the 80s. We were never a band that sat down on Battle of the Bands on Jet Radio and had people call in. Mm. You could never accuse. In fact, I never. None of us in the band ever did that once.
Yeah.
We really just wanted to give Jim Cook. He came along when Jet, was on 1400, and then moved over to FM.
He was a big supporter of local music.
Yeah, but he, we just got to know each other. I mean, we hung. I mean, after he, of course he was at Jet Radio on AM 1400, and when Rockin' Tonight started playing on K104 or CCK, he got a hold of us and said, or we actually went to him, a week or two later. We had no idea. We just gave it to Bill Shannon, sat down, talked to him. He was out. Actually, he was out near Marlin. He lived in Marlin's neighborhood, so that was a good thing too.
Right.
Bill Shannon lives out there in McCain, so
let's go see him and drop it off.
Yeah, and he wanted. I think he just wanted back then. He could make that decision.
Yeah, right.
Right. And we were fortunate at that time to be able to give him the song, but the people out there started calling. So it's all you people from Erie. It's your fault.
That's right.
It's your fault that I'm iconic.
And that goes back to what I said, beloved band. So a lot of people love this band. They have great memories of it. You made lots of friends over the years. But the band obviously continued to evolve. Keith was in it for a couple years, and then Dave Bennett comes in.
Yep.
And so Dave comes in for a long time. Great guitar player, as well as.
Well, Dave's got an interesting story, too, if I can talk about
Absolutely,
Dave.
Yeah.
No, Dave actually went to school. He was a year younger than us in Union City.
Oh, another Union City guy.
Yeah. And he started, hanging with the band, and started to become real good friends with Bob and stuff like that, and myself. And he actually was one of those guys that could dabble with a little bit of guitar, but he went to GIT out in California to the Guitar Institute of Technology.
Yeah, right.
And I think that must have been maybe in 84. You know what? He was out there I remember him telling me he was out there for the 83 US Festival.
Okay.
So he went out there, couldn't play much. I mean, he dabbled, but I'd have to say that was the best word. When he came back, he had a lot of theory, and all he had to do was over the next couple of years, the actual playing of the guitar, and he caught up with himself that he became an excellent, still is an excellent guitar player.
Did Keith bow out? He was busy with other stuff.
Yeah, I think it was. I mean, my honesty with it is that we were still doing a heavy schedule. So Keith, being in the band,
right,
had to come out and perform. And then when the movie thing kind of fell by, and he'd already been through the whole ringer anyhow with a few bands over the last 15 years. That by the time that happened, and his recording sessions, and I think that's all he was doing was a studio at that time. I think playing live and being in Friction got in his way.
Absolutely.
Which, yeah.
It's understandable.
It got in my way so many times.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So at this point, we're in the mid-'80s. Anybody married?
I don't think so.
No? Okay.
No.
So no
Not
commitment
yet.
like that. Okay, so that makes it a little bit easier. Dave comes into the band. At this point, it's the three of you, Marty, Bob,
Yeah, I'd have
Marlon.
to say Dave was somewhere in the 85, 86 range.
Okay.
Keith was in for a couple of years, give or take a year and a half of whenever those years were.
But we didn't mention Chris comes back.
Chris Winzikowski comes back.
Okay.
And
he stays with you for a number of years.
yeah, until I think 90.
Right.
Something like that.
Right.
So
And then does Ron Lesh take over for him?
yeah, somewhere in 89. I think it was 90 because I have a video of us playing at the barracks where we performed Baby Talk or I have a whole night at the barracks, and I think it was his last night.
Okay. I've seen that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometime in the winter, early spring of 1990. Yeah.
So speaking of Baby Talk, so at this point, you haven't recorded a formal album, right? You have all that stuff that you did for the soundtrack, and that stuff kind of languishes.
It was never what our style.
Yeah.
Some of the songs that were they were a little bit more of Keith and Keith's guitar work, Keith's style, Keith's Keith's generation, I should say, maybe that more 70s sound. Not that our material that Bob and Marlon and Dave and ended up writing through the 80s, but the Baby Talk album actually became like a greatest hits album of the 80s for us.
Oh, okay.
Because most of the material was written we redid a version of Rockin' Tonight that was on there from We Love Erie days.
And did you record everything at TRS for Baby Talk?
No, we ended up getting another. We ended up getting another studio. No, wait, I'm trying to think. No, most of the stuff we had our own studio out on Route 8.
Oh, you did? Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
right next to St. Bonaventure's Church. We rented that house, had a studio, and I'd say a bulk of material was written there. Not too much off the Baby Talk album was written or recorded at TRS.
What did you go to Bob Burger's to record?
Bob, Michael, and kind of got. Bob went through a renaissance where he wanted to become a better songwriter.
Okay.
So he kind of started hanging. Dennis Cohen was friends with Bob Burger, and Bob Burger through Marty Lee, because we did some recordings with Marty Lee and Kevin Valentine.
Yep.
Ended up doing the producing of us up in Ohio at Beechwood. And Bob ended up hooking up with Marty Lee and Bob Burger, but more Bob Burger as a lyricist and arranger.
Gotcha.
But also Bob, I always felt personally that Bob kind of turned into this mix between Bon Jovi and Bruce Springsteen, because Bob Michael
yeah.
did. Because Bob Burger has a very distinct way that he attacks, which is, he sent me a rough takes of about 5 or 6 songs one time, because we were, I can't remember why. But I listened to him and I said, "Man, these are huge."
And we should point out he wrote the Pulses. You want to know why and everything. So for those of you who don't know, he and his brother were in.
Yep, Jeff and Bob, and I tell you that and I never really listened, except You Want to Know Why was on the radio, but I got a chance to hear some more of their original material maybe 10 years later, and I was just really when all that started, when Bob started getting influenced, and Bob just wanted to learn. By this time, Bob and Marlon and Dave were doing most of the songwriting.
Oh,
Me, I was kind of doing the live thing, making sure the machine kind of worked. I was driving the U-Haul truck and crewing for the band, and I kind of moved away from that because and those guys put a lot of time. I'd come in and do vocals.
So the rhythm section, you and Chris were kind of the operations guys, or pretty much you.
Yeah, pretty much me.
Gotcha. Okay, that's all right.
And then when they needed drum tracks put down, Chris would come in, and then it was just.
But Baby Talk evolves at that Route 8 studio?
Yeah, I'd have to say, because Baby Talk, I think Baby Talk was written in 86, 87.
Yeah.
But most of the songs, and then there might be 2 or 3 songs like Ain't No Bed of Roses.
It's right here, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Let me look at it here. Yeah. There's a song called Bed of Roses, which probably... Whenever one of the lines in that, when I listened to it, Bob was trying to find one line because it's kind of a tribute thing to the hardness of rock and roll, and like James Dean, everlasting, and it kind of talks about maybe people that have had unfortunate in entertainment.
Gotcha.
And the song was written, I think like Jimi Hendrix, OD'd, things that happen in the industry.
Yep.
That caused those people to cut their lives short.
Yep.
Stevie Ray Vaughan actually was killed in a helicopter accident.
Right. Yep.
And then Bob wrote the line in there, Stevie Ray, we can all still hear you play.
Yeah.
You're just going heaven's way. And I can date that to that because I remember that when Stevie Ray died, Bob heard that, and he had this one bridge line that he couldn't find, and unfortunately Stevie Ray gave him the influence to write that song or write that line. So.
Were all those written in that time period? I mean, obviously you said you re-recorded "Rockin' Tonight."
Past Tense was a newer song that Dave brought in. Okay. Too Late to Cry had been around for 2 or 3 years. Bed of Roses was a song I was talking. Well, it ain't no bed of roses.
Oh, right.
Broken Heart Charity Ball. I always thought that was a newer song, but I mean, I've got recordings of us doing that live in like 86, 85.
Okay.
I mean, so to date any of these, I might be absolutely one. I know Wave Goodbye to a Friend was written a little bit later. That song has a pretty cool backstory because when we gave it to Jim Cook, I think it was at the same time when we were releasing this album. We gave it this was out in 90.
Okay.
89 area, 1989.
Yeah.
We gave Bed of Roses just like the other songs we'd given to him because we didn't give every original to Jim Cook that we wrote, but if it was good and we thought we'd give it to him or K104. But I think at this time they were kind of moving away from playing local music.
Gotcha.
But Jim still kept. And we still charted on Jet, which was cool. But Wave Goodbye to a Friend, we got caught up right at the late 80s is when the Consultants. And the reason that Jim Cook was the radio manager, program director.
Right.
He could make all the decisions. Well, they started hiring those consultants that were basically coming in and saying, here's what you need to do to make your radio station successful.
Play these songs.
Yeah. Let's play all the songs that they're paying us to, and we'll give you a little bit.
Sure, right.
I don't know if that happens or not, but I'm sure that I'm not an idiot.
Right.
But I literally saw a memo because for about a month, Wave Goodbye to a Friend was getting the same type of success. It got up to number 10 on the chart, and it won all. Kept winning all these Battle of the Bands. Did the whole thing, and I finally, I called Jim Cook and I said, it's been at number 10 for about a month now. It should have been number 1 by now, as because we had 4 other songs that went number 1, and we kind of knew that. The trajectory of the songs.
Right.
And he literally, he goes, come on down to the station, because he wasn't going to tell me. Well, he brought me down to the station, and he literally handed me a piece of paper that had these 10 don'ts.
Oh, yeah.
In 89, I actually literally seen a memo stating, number 1, do not play any unsolicited, unsigned, and then in parentheses it said local acts.
Gotcha.
And I said, that's and that's all you got to do is listen to radio now, and it's all recorded, tagged, digital, computerized, and that's when it started. I literally, and it never went past number 10. He wasn't allowed to.
And this was your first CD?
Yeah, it was our first and only CD.
It was, okay.
Yeah.
And on the back, okay, so there's 5 guys on the back, and Ron Lesh is in the band at this point.
Yeah, Ron's
over here, right? Yep.
Yeah, right there.
And so
Marlon Scott, Marty Coe, Bob Michael, Dave Bennett, and Ron Lesh.
But Matt Cavula has joined the band somewhere in the mix around this time, obviously, maybe after this comes out.
Yeah,
right?
He started. Matt, we need. Throughout all these years since the Paul Roby times, we've had a keyboardist.
But the keyboardist was Keith or Dave that were doing both
Yeah.
jobs. So then what happens? How do you make that decision? Like, let's just have a keyboard player. Dave, you're going to be the second guitar. Because that's the first time you were a 6-piece, right?
Matt kind of came in because he bought a keyboard and he started hanging around, and he was a real good guy.
Yeah, he sure
a lot
is.
of fun. He back then he was doing a lot of hockey. He was well known in the hockey
right
circles and stuff like that. And yeah, he's
a little bit younger than you guys.
Yeah. And he just started hanging out. Not that there's anything. I mean, he kind of just hung out and got a job.
Cool. Yeah.
But that's how you do it.
Yeah.
You get your foot in the door and you. That's how we did it. I mean,
there's a lot of that throughout your history, and you even talk about that.
Sure.
That guerrilla marketing, that you guys did. We just had to do it. We had to become friends with these people. So yeah, I mean that's.
Yeah.
How about on the 45 there? I always wondered about it. It says dedicated to Darren, and special thanks to Steve.
Darren he was my best friend growing up, and then he just hung out.
What's his last name?
Darren Greger.
Okay.
Yeah, and I grew up in the same neighborhood, and we just, I mean, he's still living, so it's not. It wasn't that type. It was more.
Back then?
Yeah, it was just a thing to say thanks, cool. To him and stuff like that.
Like
Steve Vandervoort, who has since passed, but he was one of our first. We went to school. Steve graduated with us and from Union City,
right?
The Mecca of rock and roll.
The Mecca of rock and roll.
Because the Butler brothers are from Union City.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. You guys got a lot of people coming out of there. Absolutely. Okay, so Baby Talk. Dave's in the band. Ron Lesh is in the band now. What goes on from there? Because at some point, you noted earlier that you're out of the band for a while. I mean, we're into the 2000s, or what are we at? Baby Talk's in 90. We're 90.
Is this where it gets deep?
I don't know.
Life got in the way. I mean, we were, 87, 88, we started traveling. We hooked up with a talent agency out of New York.
Okay.
I can't remember, a small town up there in the middle of the Finger Lakes area, And
they're booking you.
They
for you.
They started booking us around, but they had a big circuit. Like they had a big circuit in the Air Force bases and the Marine bases and all the Armed Forces bases in North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida.
And you start traveling those?
And we started traveling, doing. We did a lot of Air Force bases, surprisingly.
Wow.
And the funny thing is we actually ended up playing with a lot of the bands in the late 80s that became, like Firehouse and Jackal. And Jackal, their home base used to be in Myrtle Beach. So they had some bars there that were big that we were playing that they ended up, being from, and they were the type of bands that were coming in on those dark nights that I explained where they'd have a national act, up and coming, Firehouse, and there was a few other ones, but those were grueling. We the early 80s, we used to leave town and I'd come back we'd actually come back sometimes just to play Sherlock's on Tuesdays.
I wondered,
because we were playing every Tuesday, and we'd be in Washington D.C. and we'd drive all the way back, do a one-nighter, and then we'd have shows booked Wednesday, Thursday, Friday because not all the clubs did 7 nights. A lot of them did 4 nights, So you'd go in and play Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, or Thursday through Sunday, however.
Right.
And
I think fans don't realize that. A lot of fans, especially fans of you guys that are in Erie, we just thought, you're playing on the weekends, or you're playing at Sherlock's. We don't know where you are. All those other days, you're still playing. You're all over the place.
Most of our career, we spent more time out of Erie.
Yeah.
I mean, we weren't really, at one point, there was some times that we thought about it that we weren't even a local band anymore. Sure. Only because we were playing everywhere. And man, we had a lot of good memories, but man, it blew.
Tell me, I always like to ask this question. Worst gig ever, not in Friction, not Earthquakers or anywhere else. Crazy shit happened, something broke down, the crowd was bad, maybe not, I don't mean from your playing, I mean something happened there that...
My perspective through the whole thing, as a living perspective, right up until my performing right now, is I've never really worried about the audience.
Okay.
Never thought that deep into it. Just going, just performing, and if you did everything right, it's their perception that they're going to like you. I can't, I was never one that was like had a direction that the crowd was taking us in. Now, I can't say that all the people that I've played with have had that attitude because I don't know what they thought.
Sure.
But my thing. So in a nutshell, having a bad gig doesn't really have a definition as it might be to it morphed.
Sure, I've talked to plenty of guys, though, that have traveled around, and sometimes it's like, we got booked in the middle of Minnesota, and we show up, and, there's 5 people, and it's a snowstorm, and we're like, we still have to play to these 5 people. I mean, I'm a musician. I've had those types of things happen before. Equipment breaks, one of the guys gets sick. Who knows? I mean, Nothing comes to mind.
Well, I mean, if you want to look at gear and stuff like that, we were fortunate. There was very few times that I'd have to say, let's say if Friction did 3,000 shows over the 16 years I was in it, I don't know, maybe 2,000, whatever it is.
A shitload.
It was a lot of them.
Right.
We had very few times did we have to cancel because we had a time that our transmission went out and we had a 5-night stand that we were getting ready to go, and we did a lot of these 11-hour or 10-hour drives from Kentucky to Washington, D.C.
Yeah, right.
We did many of those where we were done. We'd play a Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday in Kentucky at the Brassey Saloon, and then we'd pack her all up and have to be in Washington, D.C. on a Wednesday night to be there for setup at 5, and we're getting out of Owensboro, Kentucky and this was a regular routine for about a year.
It's a young man's game. Yeah.
It's an idiot's game. That's really. I don't think we knew what. I mean, as I look back on it, I mean, we never knew what we were getting ourselves in for. If you had if you could look at it beforehand, and you probably 99% of the people would say no way.
Go to the opposite side though for me. So I asked you about the worst. You opened, played with, shared the stage with lots of famous folks over the years. Most exciting gig you ever had for you, Marty Coe, who used to play in.
I'd have to say just about every We Love Erie days and those ones down at the dock and those are probably the most memorable.
Yeah.
For me. I mean, as a business standpoint, whenever you like in the 80s, you'd want to like Steppenwolf. There, you had that bands that were big in the 70s that were going around playing all the like summer festivals and stuff in the 80s, and then some pretty important bands. But whenever they would say to us, hey, we want you guys to come and do a set with us at such and such fairgrounds or whatever, you're going to get great exposure.
Oh, boy.
And we thought about, well, you know what? We had a lot of exposure on the radio. We go out and play a lot.
Sure. Right.
Your exposure means you're not going to pay us,
Absolutely.
and it's probably going to be that you're not going to give us all the PA, and if it's a show that you need lights, you're going to give us about 3 lights, and you're going to make it as miserable as possible.
So that you look good. Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
so that they just fill up that half hour beforehand.
The typical opening band shit slot.
So we didn't do a lot of those.
Gotcha.
We stayed away. I mean, now if Steppenwolf or somebody from their, management or something, of that level. I just use that as an example. Foghat and they, But if they came to us and we did a few that with different bands, if they came to us and said, "Here, we want to pay you this," we're like, okay.
Were there some that you, as a music lover, were like, "Oh shit, I get to meet Foghat. I get to meet whoever, Steppenwolf"? Was there somebody that you were like, "Oh, this is cool"?
Well, probably one of the most there used to be the Alternative out on McClellan Avenue.
Right.
I don't think I think by the time this happened, it wasn't the Alternative. It had changed to a different name, and it was kind of on its way out. Yep. But it was still pretty strong out there.
Yeah.
It was a fun bar, old fashioned, painted black everywhere. Inside had a big stage.
Hullabaloo originally.
Yeah. I'd have to say 82, 83, we were doing a show, maybe 84, 85, I can't remember.
Yeah.
And this Loverboy was huge. And we probably had 6 or 7 Loverboy songs, and we did them all.
Yeah.
And there was this whole table of people that came in and were there the whole night, but for some reason, none of us ever went. It was a pretty packed house, so none of us ever went back there. Well, they started catcalling us at the end of the night because the crowd had started to filter out a little bit. And, it ended up being Loverboy.
The band.
Was in there the night before. They were doing a show at the Civic Center. And I think
really?
Whatever that Queen of a Broken Hearts tour.
Okay, yeah.
It was that song was out. So I can't remember
early
when
80s.
Yeah. I think it was their 3rd or 4th album. So and they the field house had closed, so the Civic Center was open.
Right.
But they were in the house. But we had a show the next night. So all of our girlfriends ended up getting in for free.
Gotcha.
And they spent the day, But that was fun because they complimented us. Mike Reno. In fact, I had some run-ins with him with the Earthquakers at Rainbow Gardens, where we did a show where we warmed up Loverboy at Rainbow Gardens for a Z102 event, and nice guy.
Yeah,
drinks a lot. Every time I've talked to him, he's hammered. So
Rainbow Gardens is one of those places, as a local musician, like that's a big stage, and you played there when you opened for the Pulse back in the early '80s, like we said. A lot of these places, like the Alternative, you mentioned Molly B's earlier, even Sherlock's.
Yeah,
they're all gone, But back in the day, what was your favorite place to play locally? Was it Sherlock's? Good stage?
No.
What was it?
Getting out of town and traveling.
Well, but locally, I mean. If you had to play locally, is Rainbow Gardens a good place to play? From
when you get into that grind, and we got into it pretty early, and we came out of the high schools, and we started Doc's Tavern when it was over across on the north side of town. And I know there's a lot of people out there that used to hang there before they changed it because of 79 coming down.
Right.
12th Street, the whole configuring of that was different.
Oh, on the north side.
It used to be on the north side.
Moved into the
plaza, and then they moved
across
the plaza.
Became headliners and all that, right?
That was a transition for us to move out of the high schools, and Doc's was one of and Gary at Doc's was. I mean, we had a relationship with him that was just throughout the years. That was a special place to play. Of course, they were cramming us into a corner,
right?
But the place was packed. Of course, it only took about 100 people to pack the place.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
Sherlock's was the same way. I mean, Sherlock's only took, a few hundred people to make it to pack it.
Right.
Even though people will claim that their band put 1,000 people in there, you can really only fit, 250 in
Sure.
the main thing. So anyhow, but Sherlock's was a lot of fun, but again, my attitude towards that whole thing was, man, I'm just on stage.
Right.
And there was,
playing.
And again, helping to set the gear up, driving the truck there, doing a lot of the road work that I did with the band, gave me a perspective of, I didn't really have a whole lot of time because say if we started at 10, at 10:02, I'm finishing up, setting up gear,
right,
trying to go get ready, and then going on stage at 10 o'clock. There wasn't a whole lot of time to think except for that bass guitar sometimes in about an hour and a half got extremely heavy.
Yeah, right.
Playing the same songs and doing the same thing. All of that stuff goes through it. But looking back on the 1 or 2, 3 times every show that we all laughed.
Sure. You always seem to be having a good time.
Yeah, because I'm the guy. Not that I'm the only one, but I was the guy a lot of times who was stuck in the truck at 4 o'clock in the morning when the tranny went out or
right.
blew a tire. I'd have to call somebody and I was the guy that was up until 9 o'clock because I was fixing the truck to get it 2 hours home and or all of those things. But I wouldn't change any of it.
You guys were super popular, successful. What was holding you back from the next step? Was there something?
No.
Or
no, I mean, people.
Grunge comes in the 90s, and you guys had that real 80s feel. I mean, was it a change in music or?
No.
No?
No, I think it was just, we were probably looking for the big payoff at the beginning because that's what we thought we were worth.
Yeah.
And I could sit down and tell you 10 different occasions where, let's just say we had management. Cyndi Lauper's husband was her manager and managed a few other. He really loved the band because we got in with this guy at CBS Epic who was a pretty heavy player at the time. He was actually from Titusville, but he was an executive.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, he never took us any farther than he did. But that instance there with Cyndi Lauper, we went to the Hard Rock Cafe because we thought we were signed. We were trying to get management, and he had, along with management, was album deal. Yeah. I mean, things like that all kind of tied in. When we sat in his office, We sat there. We got in there about 1 o'clock in Midtown Manhattan. Right down, because we used to go to New York, twice a month during those years and just pound the pavement, as they call it.
Was this early 80s or?
Probably 87 to 88, 89. Pushing towards wanting to get the hell out of whatever we were trying to get away from and get an album deal. And, and we met a lot. The number one thing that we did is we took our songs and gave them to all the secretaries of all the presidents and vice presidents and A&R people that wouldn't see us the first time. We'd hand out our records, our demos to them, and then they ended up listening to it. They'd be listening to it, and one of the A&R guys would walk by. This happened on a couple occasions. Hey, who's that band? Well, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Well, it's Friction. They stopped in here. Nobody would see them, but they gave us all copies.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there's many, many bands that got signed that same old way. Those people there, I mean, I went and seen some bands with some of those executives at nights that we'd get invited to go see some bands in New York City that I'd sit there and just look at this and go, is this the real world? I mean, they find this stuff good?
What happened with the Cyndi Lauper?
Cyndi Lauper ended up going down playing this big thing. So he was leaving the next day, and we had this meeting. We went to the Hard Rock Cafe that night and just got hammered because we thought we were going to be famous.
Yeah, you thought you were
and
gonna
that's not.
signed.
This ain't the first time a situation like probably happened a dozen times.
Okay,
I could tell you the same
stuff.
time. Cyndi Lauper was playing in Brazil at Rio, I think, a big show down there.
Okay.
And they were married. David Wolf, I think, Wolf Productions or Wolf Management or something like that.
Okay.
This guy just loved us. I guess he ended up, one of the two did some indiscretions. What's that word? One cheated on the other, did something like that. Yeah. Something happened in Brazil. The next thing I know, we're not getting any phone calls for the next month. And literally, we walked out of this meeting on cloud. I mean, we were 10 feet off the ground because we thought, I mean, this guy was just, I can't see somebody stroking somebody that much.
Right.
But we walked out of there, and it was everything we wanted. All the details that we talked about, big upfront bonus things, type of money. We were like, finally.
Yeah.
We never heard from the guy again.
Ever again.
And we even went out and I bet you we spent a $300, $400 bar tab at the Hard Rock Cafe in Midtown Manhattan. That's how much we knew we were going to get that money back.
Right.
I mean, we put it on our credit cards, and it hurt us later on when the 23% per monthly interest kicked in because we didn't get our album deal. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Cyndi Lauper. Yeah. Girls just want to have fun. But those kind of situations, I mean, to be blunt about it, that happened to us all the time. And I'm sure that it happened to, you get 100 musicians in here that were in the same type of, how come you guys never got signed type of thing? Because there was enough people out there that thought we were good enough that we put out a CD that a lot of people bought locally. Right. And a lot of people still talk about the Baby Talk CD. And then of course, they always ask like you did, why didn't you get signed?
Sure. Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. But I just know that, I mean, another real quick situation where we got hooked up in a management type of a thing, and we drove to Pittsburgh, met with all these people, did all this stuff, and had this big thick contract. We had our two lawyers that we'd hired in the meeting, and we went down and we were scrolling everything, and we drove home going, yes, we're going to get a deal. Yes. Finally. I mean, it was that close. Yeah. We didn't sign anything because we wanted to go back, make our amendments, send them an amended contract. Well, let's just say the guy that was the connection to this company out of California was a friend of Jim Cook's, and he was a what do they call them that comes in and shops records for back then for DJs. So what do they call it for DJs to play?
Oh, I know what you mean. Not an A&R guy. But.
Yeah, they weren't hired by they were independent.
Yeah.
And they worked for different companies, and they'd go in and they were the ones that actually did the payola.
Yeah.
Now that here's my 10 bands, here's my songs, I'll get you, here you can give away trips to the Bahamas.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. But this guy comes in and...
Well, this guy comes in and the whole connection's made, but in the meantime, we'd hired, and I won't tell you who he is because he's a very prominent guy in Erie.
All right.
As soon as I mentioned the name.
Too small of a town. Okay.
But
so hired this prominent
we
guy.
hired this guy to be our own private consultant to go out to California and shop the band.
Gotcha. Right.
He caught wind of this whole deal going down, that this independent record guy through Jim Cook hooked us up with this whole thing. This guy that we hired and put on a $500 retainer found out about it, flew to California and tried to get this guy, try to go in around this guy.
Yeah, right.
So when we came back from Pittsburgh, all this stuff was happening at the same time that when we came back from Pittsburgh, started sitting down, going over the contract and revising things on, putting some bells and whistles in there that we felt we were deserving. They said, yeah, we'll probably, Meanwhile, there's somebody that we hired in good faith backstabbing this guy that was the initial connection, that the next thing I know, again, after all this happened, nobody would take our phone calls. The complete communication shut down.
Yeah.
I found out about 10 years later when I ran into this guy at some function here in Erie, and he was still doing somewhat of the same type of show. And then I'm like, whatever happened with that? And then he told me the whole story. And I never knew that. It took like 10 years later.
Yeah, yeah.
And this guy that we hired went out and did that and kind of undercut the whole thing. So if you've got another 6.5 hours, I can tell you the other 10.
No, and that's what I was going to say. We're at the about an hour mark. So this is usually when we wrap it up. And that's probably a good point because there isn't one example. There isn't one time, there isn't one reason why you didn't move on. And we don't need to get into the parts about you leaving the band, but then in 2008, you guys do a reunion. You're still friends.
Well, let me address that real quick because there's a lot of life is really all of those disappointments, all of those things just happening, all the great things that are happening, but we're a working band.
Yeah.
Even though beyond all that, we're just a working band. We're trying to figure out how the whole thing happens. And I just got to the point that my good friends from high school and the guys that I went through, because they spent a lot of time on the artistic side of it, writing the songs. And because I always say that I've been in two bands, Friction and the Earthquakers. And, I was fortunate to surround myself with people that were far better musician. I'm a hack that took up bass guitar and I can play quarter notes. I mean, if you give me an open E or maybe I can move up to the open A, I can do that. You and I
are the same bass player, trust me.
I can play that G string. I can play that G for the beginning of Turn Up the Radio by Autograph. I can nail that. Because we had two guitars.
Right. So you surround yourself with good guys. What were you going to say?
Well, I've always surrounded myself, even with the Earthquakers. Those guys are far better musicians. I have my niche and stuff like that. But I watched that industry in the '80s, at least with Friction. They, Marlon, Bob, Dave, all of the guys, Ron, everybody we played with, but especially those guys as songwriters, really put a lot of pressure on themselves that turned them in. They got real cynical, and that wasn't their fault. It was just we didn't know. We were naive.
Sure, right.
So to say, why didn't you make it here, make it there? I don't know. We're here now, and we're you and I, Dan, have damn good looking guys.
That's absolutely right, and we're both still playing. You play a lot.
Sure.
How often do the Earthquakers play these days? In a year.
We've probably cut back to. I mean, we do a lot of summertime festivals, summertime stuff. We've kind of moved out. I mean, the bar scene isn't what it was, so
sure.
I'd have to say roughly 40 to 50 times a year, and that's actually down from when we used to do the 150 times a year in the Earthquakers and being a working band. I mean, I've got calendars over there from Friction that's showing us doing 200 shows in a year,
Crazy.
And a lot of it was traveling.
Yeah, right.
And
do the Earthquakers travel much?
Yeah, we did for a while. Now, I mean, we have a little mecca over in Lima, Ohio area where we do a lot of fairs and
yeah, that's
yeah,
cool.
that's like 5-6 hours away.
Oh, it is. I didn't realize that.
Yeah,
okay.
and we travel a lot during the summertime, 3, 4, 5 hours away.
But you're all 50s, 60s.
Yeah.
Yeah. So good.
39, 40.
39, 40. Yeah. Well, this was perfect. This is perfect. I say we wrap it up there on a high note. How's that sound?
let me. Yeah, I'm honored for you to ask me this. Anytime, anybody that knows
you here. Come on, Friction Marty Coe. I mean,
yeah,
I
but
should have had you on a long time ago.
Even beyond that, I mean, my demons that I've had. There's more people out there that I've heard this firsthand. So it's not me making shit up, but throughout my entire career, and especially in Friction, there was more people that I think disliked me because I was in Friction that never met me.
Sure.
And if and I've always wanted. Even now, when I talk to somebody, I don't want you to have to go through what I did if I know there's a way to make it easier.
Gotcha.
And that was the way it was right at the beginning. That's why I didn't understand out of that generation that was before us.
Right.
We're really protective of that.
Right,
that was at least my sense.
Yeah.
Those guys might have a different take on it and maybe looked at us as being. We never tried to be arrogant. We were naive.
We were all just jealous of your hair, man. It was just great hair. You all had great hair.
Well, after what was really cool was after about 3-4 days, if I didn't shower, I could do reggae. I hacked that sucker right. Actually, I hacked it off, in the mid 2000s.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Just I had it down to my waist, and I took a ponytail. I was tired. It was great.
Well, here's the deal. We're going to post all sorts of pictures that I have, and Marty's going to give me some more. Look on his episode page. Also, like I said in the beginning, you want to see more of Marty today? You want to hear more of Marty today? And who doesn't?
Oh,
Go to
boy.
YouTube, and we've got 3 different channels there that you can check them out. I'll include those links.
Yeah, you can search COVID's my main channel.
COVID.
Right? COE space VID.
Right.
It's a topical.
Yes, yeah.
And I dabble in the Friction stuff. Yeah. So there's the Friction Erie, YouTube page, and actually I'm going to combine them all, everything over to, and then I have a guy, outstanding rock guy, ORG.
Right.
And he's just an idiot.
Well, I appreciate you being with us today.
It was a pleasure, Dan. Anytime.
This is great.
We're done?
We are done, man.
Oh, man, I can go another hour and a half, buddy.
We'll have version 2. Yeah. Hey, thanks for listening to that episode with Marty Coe. A few reminders. Please hit the like button or the subscribe button on any of the podcast apps that you're listening to this on. And it is on most podcast apps. Also, if you feel like you want to support the podcast and donate a few bucks, you can hit the Patreon red button that's on the website. That's patreon.com. Just go to Patreon and look for Erie Music History Podcast. Greatly appreciate that. Some of the folks like Mike and Marie Miller and Ted Gokal have done that in the past, and I greatly appreciate their ongoing support. Also, occasionally, monthly, most months, I do have a music night that is also a open mic night. The local band, the Fabulous Leftovers, are the house band. We have it on Tuesday nights, usually at the end of the month. And the Fabulous Leftovers perform for an hour. It's totally free, and then we open it up to other folks, and all of the proceeds go to the Second Harvest Food Bank. So keep an eye out on the Facebook page for when the next one is, and please go out and support that. And besides that, thank you very much for listening, and I won't see you, but you'll hear me on the next episode. Take care.